we are studying development as though it's stages, this stage, this happened. I thought that's what developmental psychology is. But in the textbook that was prescribed, there was just one box that spoke about contemporary research in the field and how you can study infant minds. At that point, I was like, wait, all of the research that I've done so far is with adults who can tell us what they think and you can speak to them and learn. I was like, how do you even study infant minds? So it was just a box. It had two names, Liz Pelkey and Susan Carey, both of whom I ended up working with eventually. I never thought that would happen. Firstly, when you read people's names in textbooks, like at that point, I didn't even know where they are. Like, I had no idea. Then I just started Googling, being like, how do you study infant minds? It was crazy to me that there are methods that you can use to study the mind that have nothing to do with self-report, and you can study infant minds.
Hi there, hi. Welcome back to Psychology with Dakshi Walia. I am Dakshi Walia and I have an MSc, a Master of Science in Health Psychology. And today we have another wonderful guest on the podcast. So today we have Dr. Akshita Srinivasan. Akshita started studying psychology at the University of Hyderabad, India, where she did a 5-year integrated master's in health psychology. During the fourth year of the program, she did a summer internship at a developmental psychology lab in Boston University, after which she decided to pursue a PhD in the same field. She got her PhD in psychology at Harvard University and worked with Professor Liz Spelke on children's learning of the compositional numbers system. Broadly, her lab is focused on studying what infants know, how children learn, and what makes human cognition unique. After her PhD, Akshita started working at Stanford University as the director and lecturer of the Psychology Capstone Program. Stanford had mandated that all undergraduate students must complete a capstone requirement if they are graduating in 2025 and beyond. So the psychology department hired Akshita to design their capstone experience. She now teaches a year-long course series to help students integrate and apply their knowledge in psychology to real-world problems via a capstone project and explore career pathways that have an intersection with psychology. Together, we explore how psychology can be translated from research into meaningful real-world impact through education, innovation, and applied learning. We discuss children's mathematical cognition and language development, how psychological research can inform educational interventions, and the role of interdisciplinary thinking in addressing complex challenges. We also examine career pathways in psychology, the skills that extend beyond traditional academic routes. And also at the end of the conversation, there's some advice for students who want to go into academia, who want to pursue a PhD. So Akshita shares her wisdom of how she got into her PhD program at Harvard University, and she gives some practical advice to students who wish to do the same, who wish to apply to graduate schools. So, yeah, this is a wonderful conversation, and of course, it's packed with so much knowledge and information and understanding of how infants and babies and children learn and how they understand the world and how they understand number system mathematics. So it's a really cool conversation to like see and understand what her research is about. If you want to see more of such conversations, then please subscribe, like, share, and comment just so that we can invite more people like this and we can have more conversations. And there's no pressure at all. But if you'd like, you can also buy me a coffee through a link in the description down below. Thank you so much for being here. I'm really glad you're here. Now let's dive right into the conversation with Dr. Akshita Srinivasan. We have Dr. Akshita Srinivasan with us. So thank you so much for joining in. Just to tell our listeners a bit about how we know each other. You're my immediate senior at University of Hyderabad, Center for Health Psychology. Yeah, we never got a chance to get to know each other, but I've always admired you from afar, and your batch was so cool. Like everyone looked really amazing, and it was a really nice group of people. But I thought this is a really good opportunity to get to know you and about your research and about your journey.
Mhm.
So we can begin with your story. How did you pick psychology? Like when you were in high school and you decided that you want to do psychology, what was the process? What did you think? Did someone advise you, or yeah, what was your journey like?
Yeah. Firstly, yeah, thanks for having me. And I know we didn't chat much during college, but it's always nice to reconnect with
Yeah.
folks from your alma mater. So, yeah, my foray into psychology wasn't that intentional because in high school, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. But University of Hyderabad's chemistry department was celebrating I think Marie Curie's 100 years in chemistry or something like that. So
Mm.
they invited a bunch of high school students to visit chemistry labs. And when we were visiting, it was just like, just see what research is like and what it is. So there used to be PhD students who would set up little experiments. So we did just a walkthrough and learned about the chemistry department. But we realized that post that, they actually wanted to offer internships to students in the summer after their 11th grade to be able to, yeah, work in a lab and just get a feel for research. So after visiting, they had us submit a write up about one of the labs that we liked. And after submitting the write up, I made it to a group discussion round. So basically, all students from schools in Hyderabad were invited, and like two of us made it to the actual internship after the group discussion. I had no idea how I made it because I wasn't really a topper or anything like that in my school, especially not in chemistry.
Yeah.
But somehow I made it. And that's when I realized that, oh, research is actually fun. Like it's a different way of thinking about what I thought of as studying. Like it's a different way of learning and exploring. So I did that internship. It was like 2 or 3 months in the summer of my 11th grade. So I knew nothing. So I was paired with a PhD student, and we were in a lab that was synthesizing hydrogel. It's a kind of compound that can potentially be used for efficient drug delivery in the body.
Wow, that's a lot for
So
a 11th-year-old, like
yeah,
11th class. Yeah.
yeah, I had no idea what I was doing, but I was like, oh, research is really cool. So I would chat with the PhD student, I would chat with the PI of the lab, and I was like, okay, this is all fun, but I don't know if chemistry research is for me. So I used that summer to basically go to every department in University of Hyderabad. I'm not even kidding. Like I went randomly during my lunch break and I would ask people, oh, so what is this course about? So what can people do after this? Like what kind of jobs do you get if you graduate, say, with an integrated master's in chemistry, integrated master's in physics? So I spoke to yeah, a lot of people.
Mm.
It was quite random. And then when I came to the psychology department, I was really sold then by what the faculty told me. So there was, I chatted with a few faculty, and then they were speaking about how health psychology is an up and coming field and how there's a lot of applications, and you could help patients in a hospital setting and things like that. And I was like, this sounds nice.
Mm.
And that's when I even learned what psychology is. And then I picked up a textbook for 11th and 12th folks, like an NCRT textbook that was psychology. And I just read it and I was like, oh, this sounds cool. Like I'd like to learn more about it. And I applied to University of Hyderabad and I did a 5 year integrated master. So it was pretty random. I didn't know what psychology was. I wouldn't have known unless I got that opportunity to do an internship in University of Hyderabad.
Wow, that's a really cool story. That's like how you can, I mean, I can tell you were already so dedicated because you were going to different labs and, that's really amazing. Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and okay, and then you decided 5 years dedicated to health psychology.
Yeah.
Um, was there anything particular that you enjoyed and learned about health psychology that you were like, this is so cool. I'm really glad I chose this area and I'm really glad I'm doing this. Yeah.
Yeah, it was very interesting to think about the mind-body connection, like to think that physical and mental health are so correlated. Like in hindsight, those insights seem obvious. but
Mm-hmm.
to really um, get to learn that, and to learn that our mental health can affect physical health and physical health affects mental health, and to provide support in the context where people are the most vulnerable and they're physically ill and they also need help. Like all of that seemed exciting. It felt like there's a need for that. But then through the course, I also realized that there isn't as much systemic support to actually have a career in health psychology in India. It's still very new and things like that. So I was like, oh, there's also a lot of challenges. So it was just interesting to think about. And for a while, I thought maybe in the future, I would like to get some more clinical training and maybe do practice. But then at some point, when I got exposed to other fields within psychology, because in the first 3 years, we would sort of explore widely. Like we had a course in developmental psychology. I would always read the textbook. I would try to look up research, like contemporary research. And I realized that when I was a high schooler, I got slotted into health psychology because that's what I was first exposed to. But I realized that there's so much more to it. And
Yeah.
then in the third or fourth year, I was trying to figure out what I truly like which area within psychology do I really like. So I was excited about the field. I also realized there are some challenges in actual practice. And then I was trying to think about what my interests are as well.
Mm-hmm. And what did you figure out when you were thinking about all of this? What areas were the
Yeah.
most exciting?
So I was really excited about cognitive psychology, how we learn, how we think, how the brain works. All of that was really exciting to me. And when I was, we had a course in developmental psychology in University of Hyderabad, but that course made me feel like we are studying development as though it's stages, this stage, this happens. And I thought that's what developmental psychology is. But in the textbook that was prescribed, there was just one box that spoke about contemporary research in the field and how you can study infant minds. At
Mm.
that point, I was like, wait, all of the research that I've done so far is with adults who can tell us what they think, and you can speak to them and learn. I was like, how do you even study infant mind? So it was just a box, and it actually said, it had two names, Liz Pelkey and Susan Carey, both of whom I ended up working with eventually. I never thought that would happen. Firstly, when you read people's names in textbooks, like at that point, I didn't even know where they are. Like, I had no idea. Then I just started Googling, being like, how do you study infant minds? It was crazy to me that there are methods that you can use to study the mind that have nothing to do with self-report, and you can study infant minds. So then I was really excited by that idea. And then the intersection of developmental psychology and cognitive science seemed really interesting. So in the fourth year, when I was Googling all of this stuff, I then decided that I should probably do an internship in a developmental lab. And that's when I went abroad. Like I went to Boston University for a 3-month internship in a developmental psychology lab. So that's how I was like, these ideas are really new. I want to learn them. And that's how I sort of pivoted.
Yeah, amazing. And how did you figure out how did you make the decision to go abroad to Boston University to do an internship? Why not in India? And how did you go about finding that internship?
Yeah, at the time at least, there were not that many like labs that did developmental psychology and cognitive science. Maybe things have changed now, but at the time I couldn't find much within India. And I was like, this textbook is giving me names of people who do this research. I'm just going to look them up and see what that's like. Like, what do labs look like? What do different people who study this field look like? Then I realized that there's actually so much contemporary research that I have nothing like that I haven't been exposed to at all. So the idea to go abroad was, it gave me a starting point. Like I saw that these people are at Boston. Then I realized that, oh, Boston's a place that has many schools. If I go for a summer internship, I may be in one lab, but I'll get the opportunity to visit multiple different schools and maybe check out multiple different labs. That was the idea. It was pretty random. Like now that I think about it, I don't know why I
Why?
chose Boston, but I think it was that. Like my thinking was that there are multiple schools, and then the textbook like gave me names of few people, and I just went from there. Like quite literally that. And the process of applying, I had no idea. So what I would do was I would look up all of the different schools, then I would look at the psychology department, and within the psychology department, I would read all of the faculty bios. And then there would be links to their websites. So I would see
Yeah.
different pictures in their websites, like research, people, and most of them would have some sort of application form for summer interns. I would fill that out. And in cases where that wasn't there, I would just email the lab manager and the PI being like, I'm really interested in your lab. Here are some things that I'm actually particularly excited about. Do you have any opportunities? I may have like applied to maybe easily like 40 to 50, or
Wow.
like cold email people or just submitted forms. And then I heard back from just one.
Yeah.
And then they interviewed me, and that's the one I ended up going with, like in Boston University. And it was very interesting because the mentor who was a PhD student back then, who I was working with, was interested in cross-cultural research more broadly. So I think that's why the prospect of having an international student was also exciting for the lab more generally.
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my first experience.
Yeah, amazing. That's awesome. Really cool that you saw like a little textbook page and you
Or
were
just
like,
one box, yeah.
and it's amazing that Liz was eventually your PhD supervisor. That's
Yeah.
amazing. So yeah, then you came back and you finished your master's,
Yeah.
and then you went on to apply for graduate schools in the US.
Yeah.
And you got into Harvard University where you did your PhD. So,
Correct.
what was the process like there? How many schools did you apply to? Did you get into all of them, or did you not get into all of them? And how did you go about choosing the lab that you did?
Yeah. After graduating, actually, I spent 1 year as a research fellow in the lab that I ended up doing my PhD in. So it wasn't straight into PhD programs because I felt like I needed more experience. My application wasn't strong just the first time around with just one internship experience. I was still learning the methods. I was still even learning what the big questions in the field are. What do I want to study? So I wasn't really a strong applicant like immediately after graduation. So the year that I spent doing research full time, I think was the year where I truly learned about the field and learned about how to even apply and what matters in an application. Um, so yeah, that helped a lot. I was working with a PhD student in Liz's lab, and then Liz was doing some new research that I got involved in, and I started working with her directly, and I learned what it feels like to work with a PI, to generate new questions, to design experiments. Then I ended up applying. I constrained the geographical area like to the East Coast. I didn't really apply very widely back then because my partner was in Boston, and I was like, I'm going to try to coordinate to be close to Boston. So I think I applied to maybe like 6 or 7 schools,
Yeah.
all within the Boston, New England region. And I got into just Harvard. I didn't have any choice there. So I was like, okay, this is what I'll take then.
Oh my God, what other schools did you apply to?
I applied to Boston University, Boston College, Brown, Yale, NYU, I think, and maybe Columbia.
Amazing. That's so cool that you got into one university, which was Howard. Like, I'm just, just like
Yeah.
considering how that feels to someone coming from, it means so much for us to have an academic career, which is like really amazing. That's awesome. Did you submit a research proposal, or did you know Professor Elizabeth Spelke already? Did you reach out to her? What was the process like?
Yeah, so this may vary, like maybe Europe and US have slightly different requirements.
Yeah,
So in the US, we aren't really required to submit a research proposal. It's more like a personal statement of sorts, where you say, what background do you have in research so far? Why do you want to do a PhD? And once you're accepted, what kind of research program will you have? What are some questions will you study? And why are you applying to this particular department to work with these particular faculty? So
yeah,
there's that, which is, I think, the main piece of the application. And then there's letters of recommendation. So the way that I first even figured out whom to apply to work with is not all professors take PhD students every year. So I first emailed them or tried to find out information from their website to see if they're even accepting a PhD student. Because if they're not, that's one wasted application. Even if you're very good, they just don't have the chance to accept a student. So I would be, yeah, looking at that. And then Liz said she is accepting a student. And then I also chatted with her about like the sorts of directions that she sees her lab going in. And those were exciting to me. And even though I was there, the competition was steep because there's so many people who have worked with Liz in the past. There's me and there's several other interns, and there's several other people who know her work so well who want to work with her. So it's pretty competitive in that sense.
Yeah.
So even though I was there, I was like, okay, I'm just going to try. We'll see what happens. And a committee evaluates your application. So though you try to work with one advisor, like you list others, they all interview you. So that's how it went. Like I submitted my application, had letters of recommendation. Then I was invited to interview. Actually interviewed, I think I did at a couple of places, but I eventually ended up making it only to Harvard. And yeah, like I interviewed with some committees. Some schools had interview days where you go and meet different people. Some of them are more one-on-one. And yeah, that's how the process was.
Awesome. And if you could tell us a bit more about what does the Spelke Lab study, and
Mhm.
how did you sort of move your interest towards children's cognition and learning? If you can share a bit more about that. Yeah.
Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier, I was starting to explore developmental psychology in my fourth year. And when I was in the lab at Boston University, I loved the methods. I was like, oh, you design fun experiences for children, and they feel like they're having fun and they're playing a game. But then what you're actually learning is something deep about their brain and how they learn and how they interpret the world around them and learn about the world around them. So I was really fascinated by that. And Liz's lab does work with infants as young as 3 months to children as old as 7 years.
Mm-hmm.
So it was great because it gave me an exposure to a variety of different methods. So, for example, with infants, you do looking time studies. So we're basically showing them videos, we are measuring what they're looking at, and then the idea is that they look at things that they're more surprised by. So if they're looking longer at it, it means that they're surprised and they already have a certain assumption to even be surprised by what you're showing them. So this is a way to learn what they already know about the world. So there were methods like that with infants and eye tracking and things like that. And with children, you set up little games, you can ask them questions and they'll make choices. And there was a wide range of methods, a wide range of studies, a wide range of topics that were being covered in the lab. But mainly, Liz's lab is interested in studying what infants already know about the world and then how children learn. So, when infants are born, a lot of the cognitive capacities that they have, we share with our other ancestors as well, like other primates, for example. But at some point, human cognition becomes unique, right? Like there is some things that we do. So then, like, what makes human cognition unique?
Yeah.
Um, how do children learn? What happens when the kinds of knowledge systems that infants come into the world with, like if that then interacts with culture and socialization and education, like how do cognitive processes then change? So these were like the broad range of things that my lab used to study. So when it comes to infants, my advisor studies what infants know about the physical objects that occupy the world. What do they know about the places in their environment? What do they know about the people in their social environment? What do they know about number? And what do they know about people as agents who act on the world and cause physical changes in the world? So this is all the stuff that she was studying. The area that I chose was numerical cognition. Like, what do infants already know about numbers? And then how do they then learn the symbolic number systems that we have developed over our cultural history? Like, how do children then learn it? And then I also did some work on educational interventions. So how can we teach children who who have some knowledge about numbers, but they still have like an uphill task of learning all of the complicated math? Like how do they learn it? What are some ways in which we can design games so they can learn it in a way that helps them, yeah, like basically succeed in school. So that's what I ended up picking as my focus.
Amazing. Very fascinating how children learn and how you got about choosing that as your research topic. So this is a
Mhm,
really good headway to your research. And what did you actually study for your
mhm,
research? I was doing a little bit of my own research, and I found your thesis because it's available on the website. So I did read your abstract. Seems
mhm,
like a heavy research. It seems like there were like a lot of chapters. You had around 5 or 6 chapters.
mhm,
Um, so I want to make sure that anyone who's listening can understand your research,
mhm,
um, and to assume that they don't know anything about
mhm.
psychology.
Yep.
So yeah, let's begin with your topic, which is children's learning of the compositional number system. So
Yeah.
what is the compositional number system, and yeah,
Yeah.
what did you study?
Yeah, so I'll first start by saying like what the compositional number system is. It's what we as adults have come to learn. It's just, I guess, like a fancy way of describing the number system, but it's basically the natural number system, right? Like we have 0 through 9, which are the digits, and then our number system is organized around the base number 10. So with just 0 through 9 and the base number 10, we can generate any natural number, right? Like, so for example, 234 is two hundreds, three tens, and then four ones. So this is a symbol system that packs a lot of information within it. So when we write 2, 3, 4, it's different from a different if you okay, let me just go with the two-digit number. So if we say 34 and 43, they represent different quantities, though the digits in them are the same. And what tells you what quantities these are is if you understand this compositional system of numbers where you combine digits with some power of the base number 10 to generate all numbers, and that tells you what the magnitude of the number is, what quantity it signifies, and things like that. So children start learning about numbers very early on. Even like a 1.5 or 2 year old starts counting, right? They can go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and they can count maybe up to 20. And those kinds of abilities keep improving with age. But once they reach upper kindergarten or early first grade, they also start thinking about arithmetic and things like that. And to really understand arithmetic, you need to understand the number system and that it's compositional. And compositionality is also a key feature of human cognition in the sense that our language is compositional. We all have finite vocabularies, like we know a certain number of words, but the number of sentences we can utter and the number of thoughts we can understand based on a finite vocabulary is infinite because we know how to combine these words in very productive ways using rules to generate many sentences and understand many sentences. So similarly, numbers are generative and compositional like that. By just having a few elements like 0 through 9 and a base number 10, we can generate infinitely many numbers. And while these systems are super productive, learning them is really hard because it packs so much information into the symbol system, into the number words. So that is what the compositional number system is. And what I studied is from a very early understanding of number, how do we get children to this understanding? I mean, children get there, but how do they get there? How do they learn about it? And what sorts of representations and what sorts of tools help them learn these things efficiently?
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, that's, I guess, the first part.
Right, right. That makes sense. I had to, because I've not studied math for a while. I had to like go and see what compositional means, and I was like, okay, I had my notebook out, and I was like, 234 means 200s. For so
Yeah.
it was really fun to sort of like revise all of that. It's very basic, but how children learn is very different from how we understand these
Mhm.
numbers. So, what
Yeah.
challenges do children face when they're learning this compositional number system, and how did you go about figuring out what those challenges are, and how can we work with children to help them understand this in a better way? Yeah.
Yeah, there are several challenges. One is the first way in which children start to learn about numbers is through number words, right? So in English, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then we have 11, 12. So 11 is actually a combination of 10 and 1, and 12 is a combination of 10 and 2. But these number words don't make that transparent, right? Like when you say 11, it isn't clear that it's a combination of 10 and 1. But there are some other languages, like for example, Mandarin. The number word for 11 is literally 10-1. The number word for 12 is 10-2. And the
Hmm.
number word for 20 is 2 tens. So 20 still tells us that maybe it has something to do with 2 tens, but it's not as transparent as 2 tens. And then English is still all right, but I don't know if you're familiar with Hindi words, but Hindi number words are really, really difficult. So when we
Hmm.
say Bavan, I've learned to memorize this. It's 52. I would never remember this because it has nothing to do with 5, 10, or 2, right? So children who
Yeah.
are learning these number words are learning to say them and say them in order, but we aren't sure if they actually understand what they mean and what quantities they represent, and that they are a productive combination of the numbers that they learned earlier. So that's one challenge, right? Like number words. Um, are not really transparent in revealing this base 10 system. And number words have just evolved maybe to just be short and easy to say, but they aren't necessarily telling us what quantities they actually represent transparently. So that's one challenge. And then there's the challenge of learning number symbols. So when you write 2, 3, 4, why is that a different quantity from, say, 432? You
Hmm.
understand that only when you understand place value, right? Like that the number that's furthest to the right is the ones, and then it's tens, and then hundreds, and then place value increases from left to right. And we write in the opposite direction. So it's pretty counterintuitive. If you think of a ruler, numbers increase from left to right. But in place value, numbers actually go in the opposite direction, right? Because the smallest number is towards the right, but in a ruler, the largest number is towards the right. So it's counterintuitive for that reason. Like symbols are different from regular conventions of, say, rulers or even writing systems. So that must be hard for children. They must be like, wait a minute, what is this? Why do we think of numbers in this way? And yeah, just understanding place value codes and unpacking these symbol systems must be hard for them. And then they have to learn that number words and number symbols are then related to each other. They represent the same quantities. So all of these lead to challenges in learning the number system because they have to learn all of these complicated symbols. And
Yeah.
another challenge, I think, is the ability to think of the same thing in two different ways. This is also another feature of human cognition. Like we do this all the time. So you need to be able to think of a 10 as a single 10 and also as something that contains 10 ones. The borrowing and carrying, all of those algorithms of arithmetic depend on it. So you need to be able to count over tens. Like, for example, if I have baskets where I tell you that there are 10 apples in each, you don't need to count all of them. You can just go 10, 20, 30, 40. But if I need you to also break them up into sets of 10 and give me 39, you need to be able to do that. So you need to think of a 10 as a whole unit and also something that can be broken down into 10 ones and switch between those two kinds of ways of thinking about the number.
Yeah.
So that's also another challenging aspect. So just to recap, I think it's learning of the number words and symbols and what they mean, and the ability to think about the number 10 in two different ways and switch between the two when working on the algorithms of arithmetic.
Yeah, these are absolutely challenging concepts to learn for children.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Um, So there's also, like you spoke about how it's easier, no, how in Mandarin 11 is 10-1,
Mhm.
and also in Tamil it's the same, but in Hindi and English, number words do not translate to its logic of the number.
Mhm.
And that's one of the challenge. So is it easier for people who speak the language which translates the number words easily? Is it easier for them to learn, or
Yeah,
yeah,
that's such
more?
a great question. It's one of the things I worked on. Like, does the language that a child speak or learns their number words in affect how quickly they can learn these number concepts? Because, some languages are more transparent in revealing this base 10 structure. So I did a study to compare children who speak Mandarin, Hindi and Tamil within India, and Turkish and English. So this was like a multi-part study. I won't go into the details of all of the languages, but basically what we find is that Mandarin speaking children have an advantage early on. So they're able to count much higher at early ages as compared to, children who speak English or Hindi. Um, but at some point, like when they start learning arithmetic, like base 10 is hard even for children who speak Mandarin. Like there is still, they also face certain challenges. And this might be due to the other things that I mentioned, like the symbol systems and thinking of a 10 in two different ways. And the thing that's tricky about these studies is children who speak Mandarin in China and children who speak English in the US and children who speak Hindi and Tamil in India. Like they're all, language is one thing that varies between them, but there's a lot of other things that varies as well, right? Like education and maybe the emphasis on number words and things like that. So, which is why these kinds of studies are tricky to do because how can you see that whatever results you're seeing are because of the language? Which is why I chose to study two languages within India, Tamil, a more transparent language, and Hindi, a more opaque language. And the children went to government schools where these are the primary languages in which it's the primary language of instruction for them. And the schools are also similar in terms of the kinds of socioeconomic status that the kids generally have and the kinds of curricula that they use, which is why that was important to have as much similarity as possible and think about just language if possible. Even here, there's going to be things that are different, but this is a close attempt. And what we found is pretty similar to what I said earlier, that Tamil speaking children show some advantage in terms of counting ability and things like that, but even they find base 10 and arithmetic and all of that hard to learn.
Yeah, makes sense. Is there a particular age as well where it gets easier for children to learn the base number system?
Yeah, it varied a little bit by different countries, but I think that 6 is when they're starting to figure it out. Around 7 or 8 is when they reach peak performance in the kinds of things that we studied, like an understanding of base 10, ability to count high, simple arithmetic.
Yeah, awesome. And is there a particular age at which intervention, like the one that you did, which we will speak about, your the educational game, is there a particular age where having an intervention, a small scale intervention like that, would help children um, have a better
Yeah.
understanding of the base number system? Yeah.
Yeah, so we chose particular ages based on previous interventions and based on what they will learn in school and things like that. So my work doesn't really answer like what age is the optimal to do these interventions, but roughly like 5 to 7 is what I targeted.
Yeah.
Because that's when they start learning these concepts in school, start being exposed to simple facts in arithmetic and things like that. And it's the age where they have a lot of arithmetic instruction as well. So it seems like if they learn about the number system, it would be during that time, given what they go through in the curricula. So that's what we chose. And yeah, I guess that's all I'll say about the interventions for now.
Yes, amazing. When it comes to the challenges that we spoke earlier about, do you think that the school system, when they're teaching the number system to children, have you studied anything, or have you come across an observation like that where they're doing something that's not optimal for their learning, or that they could do differently when they're trying to teach children basic number system?
Yeah, a lot of schools do it differently. So I have more of an idea of the landscape in India because I've been through that education system and I also did some interventions in India. In the US, it also varies based on the type of school. For example, Montessori has some specific tools to teach base 10 concepts. So, for example, they have blocks. They have little blocks that are all ones. If you stack 10 of them together, it's a stick of 10. And then if you put 10 sticks together, it's a small square of 100. And if you stack 10 hundreds together, that's 1,000. So they have these blocks that they play with to understand face value. Um, so yeah, it really depends, I guess, on the kind of school and the kinds of tools they use. But in India, um, there are a lot of facts about numbers that are introduced, but it isn't. And children on the surface seem like they excel in them. So they learn to count really quickly. They can do arithmetic, but it isn't clear if they deeply understand the logic or if these are just motions that they're going through to get to the right answer. because it's possible to get to the right answer if you just follow some rules. So there may be a stage in school where that is emphasized, that here are the rules and here's how you get to the answer, that misses the logic that sits behind, like how numbers are structured and what the algorithms of arithmetic even mean and things like that. So I think there's a stage where it looks like children are really proficient, but what they truly understand about numbers, we don't really know. And a true understanding of it matters if you want to progress further in your grades.
Yeah, that makes total sense because if I look back, I'm a Hindi speaker, but I still cannot, after a certain point, count in Hindi because I'm just
Yeah.
like I'm more proficient in counting in English, and it's because, like you said, Bhavan doesn't make any sense, how it is 52. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's a wonderful observation where I think we're not really trying to understand the logic behind things, and we're just like moving on. And especially in
Yeah.
a
And in a
country
language
like,
like Hindi, it's very tough also. So, like maybe in Hindi, like if you're learning number words, like number words aren't the way to get to the logic to base 10. So maybe it's the number symbols and the algorithms of arithmetic that get you there. So, it's really hard to tell how we even learn it. In Hindi, it can't be through the number words because, yeah, even I learned how to count in Hindi and I just can't do it for the life of me even today. So,
yeah, that's true. Awesome. And then, okay, this is really cool. This is very interesting research. Yeah, so let's talk a bit about how your research evolved into development of an educational
in-
game for
in-
children.
yeah. So my lab, Liz, she was doing work in collaboration with economists. So if you may have heard of Esther Duflo and Abhijit Banerjee, who won the Nobel Prize in economics. I think now maybe I don't know how many years ago, but if I'm right, maybe it was 2019, but I could be wrong about that. But anyway, my advisor collaborates closely with Esther Duflo. And basically, even before I joined the lab, they did an intervention with preschools in India. So, education, there are a lot of children that are in early school, even in India. But despite being in school, they are performing below their grade levels. We have national assessments in India. They do national assessments of like reading and math that are quick that many children get, and through those tests, we find that children are not really learning to their grade appropriate level. So Esther does a lot of work in India related to education. And then I think she and my advisor started talking about what we could do so that children are set up for success, right? Like once they're in preschool, like kindergarten and stuff, once they actually go to first grade, how do you set them up for success such that they can learn and succeed in school? So what can we do early on so they can learn certain concepts, maybe, or be exposed to them to be able to succeed in school. So my lab was already doing these kinds of interventions. They had done one round of interventions where they designed games, like four math games, two focused on number, two focused on geometry, that exercise these early intuitions that all children have about number and geometry. Like I told you, infants also have certain intuitions. So, for example, infants can tell two quantities apart as long as the ratios between them are sufficiently large. So, even without counting, they can tell two numbers apart. And even infants, without counting or language, can tell one and two apart, and in some cases, two and three apart. So they can tell large quantities apart if they're separated by a certain ratio, and they can tell small quantities within three apart. Like one is different from two, two is different from three, and obviously one is different from three. So, building on these sorts of early intuitions, my lab with another PhD student at the time, like designed interventions, and they administered it to these low-income preschools in India. And what they found, they were interested in seeing the effects of the intervention not only immediately after, but even 1 year after, to see if these early interventions that lasted a period of 3 4 months have an effect on long-term learning, because that's the goal, right? Like you want children to be able to succeed in school long
Yeah.
term. So they found that there was an effect of the interventions immediately after, but the effects on school learning reduce. after the intervention has stopped. So the intervention was 3 or 4 months long, and they were assessments that were done immediately after, 6 months after, and 1 year after. So only in the assessments that were done immediately after the intervention, like maybe within 1 or 2 months, they showed effects of the intervention on the kinds of things that children need to learn in school. But then long term, there were no effects. But these intuitions about number and geometry remained. The children who played the math games showed an improvement in those kinds of intuitive abilities even 1 year after training, as compared to children who played a different set of games that exercised their social cognitive abilities. So there were some effects of the games, but not, it didn't translate to school learning. And at each point, the assessments were meant to capture what children are learning in school. So they're different. So, they were truly looking at whether children are learning better in school. So, given that we wanted to improve long-term learning, we then, at that point, my lab was trying to think of what other games can we design? Like, how do we make sure that we have learning effects that are sustained? So, we then started thinking about these games. How can we redesign them? And then, when you want to implement an intervention in the field, it makes sense to start small and test them out in a smaller population. So that's why I was working on home-based interventions. So in schools, the interventions are 3, 4 months long, and every child plays for an hour a day, an hour a week. I forget like the exact duration, but they have like a lot of play with the games that we designed. But to even see what the effects are like, we did home-based interventions. So we would design games, send them home with families. They would play for 2 to 3 weeks, and we would do assessments pre and post to see whether these games even have any promise. And that's one thing, like you do smaller scale interventions to complement larger scale interventions, because if a game works, then you will send it to the field and evaluate it. But sometimes in the field, because children are playing these games for 3 to 4 months together, we can't just have one game. So if we have multiple games in a field experiment, we then still evaluate them using home-based interventions to see which game is improving what sort of skill. Do we need all of these games, or is one better than the other? So if there's a time crunch, which game would we actually implement? So the intervention research was really interesting for me because I was doing small scale home-based interventions,
Yeah.
which were ultimately meant to complement these large scale field studies that my lab was doing in collaboration with economists. And it was also really interesting to see like these sorts of randomized control trials from the perspective of economists, development economists, and how they design them and what outcomes they think about and what cognitive scientists think about. Like cognitive scientists are thinking about what are children actually learning, what representations are helping with the learning of what kind of skill, how can this learning be sustained. So yeah, it was interesting for all of those reasons. Like it exposed me to a different kind of collaboration. Like in the beginning, it was like from health psychology to maybe the intersection of developmental and cognitive. And then from now, it's the intersection of developmental, cognitive, education, then development economics. So I was like, oh, wow, there are all of these different fields that care about similar questions. And it was a really cool experience to be involved in that, to learn about interventions, how to design them, how small scale interventions complement large scale interventions, and why they both are required sort of hand in hand to answer similar questions.
Awesome, amazing. And did you find that the game, the small scale game that you applied, did it improve children's
Yeah.
learning? It
It
did.
did. It did. So it improves children's learning in math immediately after training. Like we just have them play the games for like about 2 to 3 weeks, and then we measure their math skills right after, and then it improves. But those games are now being scaled up, and they are being implemented in large scale interventions in India, and all of that research is still going on.
That's really cool. So this is a classic example of how your research can be applied to real world challenges and how it can be like your research doesn't have to be just psychology. It can be interdisciplinary and it can,
Mhm.
inform other improvements in other areas as
Mhm.
well.
Yeah.
Amazing. That's really cool. Anything interesting that you learned about how, because this is a classic example of how to apply a research into a real world environment. Anything interesting insight that you can give us that can help someone who's doing research similar to yours can go about finding ways to apply this into the real world environment?
Yeah, I was very lucky that my advisor was already going in that direction, right? Like, it was really unique to be in a lab that does research like within the lab, like in really controlled environments, and also on the field where everything's chaotic. Like, we are designing these games, sending it to teams in India. Some people learn how to administer these games. They then train others, and then kids play those games. It's such a different you have to account for so many other variables. Like the games have to be interesting enough. Like it's a classroom where there are 30 to 40 kids all playing in little groups. And the teacher's just there to set up the games. But the games have to be interesting enough for children, firstly. And they have to be able to play it on their own in little groups. So the translation between like the controlled environments in which we do research to the field, like there was a lot to learn for me. And I was only able to do that because my advisor already had these collaborations. But I guess for anyone interested in doing like more, they call it basic research, but I don't know why they call it basic research. When it's not applied, they call it basic and then they call it applied. But you know what I mean, right? Like when you're doing research and you're thinking of more applications of it, I would say the best way to do that maybe is to find collaborators who can think about applications of your work, who may already have labs that think about it, and then you can come in with a bit of the theory and how it works, and they can tell you a little bit about the scaling up and what scaling up of such interventions actually look like. Like we wouldn't be able to do this without the economists because they are the experts in these kinds of large scale interventions and what goes into it. So I think I would say collaborating is probably the best way to do it because you need to learn a new field and a new skill set and a new way of thinking about these same things.
Yeah, that's a good tip for anyone trying to apply their research to real world environment to collaborate and find people who can translate that into a real world application.
Yeah,
Amazing.
and it
So
needn't just be with academics. Like there are a lot of real world organizations interested in this. Like there's so many education NGOs, for example, that work on these same questions. So doing maybe an internship with them, even outside like academia, I think could be very helpful in
yeah.
translating.
Yeah, that's true. And do you think sometimes academia does struggle to make research more accessible? Because I was also thinking this that there's research that is being done, but it is only applied to the next research or it is cited in the next research, but it's not really practically applied to real world problems. So do you think academia sometimes struggles with that?
Yeah, I think there's a huge gap between research and practice, be it anything like even clinical practice or education and anything. There are huge gaps. And, some academics think of it actively. They have projects that try to engage the community and work with them and things like that, but there's still a huge gap.
Yeah, that's true. And this is why Stanford University did hire you to do a capstone project in
Yeah.
order to sort of work with this gap. So, yeah, now you're a lecturer and a director at Stanford University, and your program is called the Capstone Program, right? What is the
Called
philosophy?
Psych Applied Capstone.
Psych applied capstone, yes. So, what is the philosophy behind the psych applied capstone, and what are you teaching graduate students at your course?
Yeah. So Stanford I don't know what year, basically Stanford mandated that all students who are graduating, like from their undergrad, the 4 year program, need to do a capstone experience. Earlier, some departments had it, some didn't. And then most departments, even if they had a capstone option, they would do an honors thesis, which is like academic research, right? Basically, you're working on a research question, you're doing an experiment, you're collecting data, and you're writing a thesis. So there's that experience. But they said that even students who are not choosing to do an honors thesis must complete a capstone requirement. So each department has to figure it out in terms of what they want their capstone experience to be. And it was going to be mandatory. And like, for example, in the psychology department, if there's, say, about 70 students that are graduating with the psychology degree, about 15 or so of them do an honors thesis, but the majority of them don't. So they didn't have like a culminating experience where they do an independent self-led project. So this capstone course is meant to fill that gap. Like, what do the students who are not doing an honors thesis do?
Hmm.
That still is shows mastery in psychology, right? Like you have to show that like you've learned something over these 4 years in psychology. And like when I was interviewing, we were chatting about what it should be. And I got the chance to develop this vision together with my department, which is so exciting because I designed like the first iteration of the program and the first iteration of the course series. And we just had the first cohort of students like finished their capstone requirement last year. And this year, the second cohort of students are finishing it. So it's still a new program. But basically, the idea is twofold. One is to help students integrate and apply their knowledge in psychology to a real world problem. Basically, think about the applications of psychology and think about psychology in conjunction with another field also, if they would like to think about a real world problem and think about how psychology can help answer it. So the projects have that focus, like an application focus, then it has to be tied to a real world problem. And the second aspect of it is how can you use this experience then to navigate careers, right? Like through this process of having a self-led independent project where you have to truly think about your interests and what excites you about psychology, you also have to then think about how you're going to take this with you in the future, like what sorts of master's programs do you want to apply to, or do you want to go into the workforce straight after? What kinds of opportunities are available if you're thinking about these questions within psychology and how you can apply them? So the goals are sort of twofold. One is an application of psychology itself. I'm doing a project, which is the capstone project, and the second is career exploration. So I teach a year-long course series where I have the same cohort of students who stay with me for 3 quarters. They're all seniors in psychology, so they're in the fourth year of their undergrad degree. And in the first quarter, I help them come up with a project proposal. In the second quarter, they produce about a 50% draft of their project, which I then go over, give feedback, see if it's shaping up well. And then in the final quarter, they wrap up their capstone and they do a showcase to the department. So all of the students put up a poster, and my department goes and does a walkthrough to check out the posters, which is actually tomorrow. So my students are finishing tomorrow.
Yeah.
Uh, and that's what the course series is like. And each quarter, this is the capstone requirement. And each quarter, I also have some career stuff built in, like doing informational interviews, writing a career essay that synthesizes the knowledge, skills, and characteristics required for a career of their interest. And then a career portfolio where they have to work on a resume, a cover letter, apply to at least a few jobs, or have a few job postings that they're excited about and tailor their materials towards. So that's the career piece. And each quarter we build on that as well. And to do all of this, I collaborate with a lot of centers within the department. So within Stanford, not within the department. So Stanford has a career education center whom I collaborate with. So I bring them in for workshops so my students can learn about resumes and things like that. Like the career ed folks are experts on this. And then many students are interested in a community engagement, like applied aspect of their work. So we have a center for public service in the department. So I have people from there do a workshop for my students. So if any student wants to do a project in collaboration with a community partner, like a school or an NGO or whatever, they can find those partnerships through this center. So yeah, I Stanford has a lot of resources and a lot of different centers, and my role is basically bringing them to my students, letting my students know of them, and providing mentoring and support for their projects, which span actually a lot of different topics.
Yeah, sounds like a very necessary course that I feel like every undergraduate student should have to be able to explore different areas and what they can do with their career and how to apply. Have you found any sort of interesting ways in which your students have come up with real world applications of their studies? Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think that's the best part of my job because I get to follow their ideas and I get to see psychology applied to so many different things that even I wouldn't have thought of. So, some examples are one of my students this year wrote a children's book to basically explain what the pediatric hospital experience is like. So a lot of children are in the hospital, like they go through long-term hospitalization because of a particular illness, right? Like, and it's a very unusual experience to have as a child, right? Like you're not in school, you're not seeing your friends, you're in a hospital room. There are all these adults that are part of your care team, you're away from your home, and a lot of stuff is going on with you physically. So this is a very it's a very difficult experience for children and their caregivers to go through. So she actually wrote a children's book that introduces children to what that experience is like. So when you come, here's how the care team will meet you. Here's what it looks like. Here are the equipment. Here's how they care for you. So it's a very interactive and fun children's book. And the idea is to pilot that in collaboration with hospitals and see how caregivers and children receive it and whether it's actually useful and whether it actually helps children with their emotional experience. And whether it gives, and the idea is also to give caregivers a way to talk about this experience with their children. So that's one project. And this book also has like an activity book. So it has like, so there's like a hospital gown that you can design on your own. There's a bingo, like in your hospital room. Like if you spot this machine, check this box, this sort of a thing. Like they have little exercises that my student built and then like a whole book. So it's just such a great project and such a nice application of psychology towards like a very real problem. That's one. Some of my students are athletes and they think a lot about sports psychology. So one student of mine um, wanted to improve her backhand throw and basically dive deep into this technique called visualization, where the idea being that like if you are able to stimulate the mental steps of actually performing a motion, that can help when you actually go and physically perform it because you can't overexert yourself in physical practice all the time. Like as an athlete, like you have to stop at some point, right? Like you can't practice to the level of overexertion, but visualization really helps. So she basically tried this technique and ended up improving her backhand throw and basically made a video based to explain what the technique is, how she used it, how she actually visualized and how it led to actual improvement in the outcomes for her. And she also led a workshop for her teammates to explain this technique so they could also then practice it. So this was one project. And all of the projects have different formats. So the first one was a children's book. The second one is a report of a workshop plus a video. One student was interested in equine assisted therapy, so like horse assisted therapy. So he found a community partner that does group therapy in collaboration with horses. And that center was interested in evaluating the impact of this. Like, how do the patients actually feel? What element of the relationship with the horse is important for the therapeutic aspect of their experience? So he collected data on this and wrote a report. So that's one project. Another project is at the intersection of psychology and law. So one of my students was thinking about neuroscience evidence and how it's used in law. So a lot of times when you're thinking of culpability and whether someone should basically receive a sentence or not, like sometimes neuroscience evidence is used either for or against it, but it's not used in a way in which maybe researchers intended. Like if there is a particular, say, growth in a particular region of the brain, yes, it may be correlated with certain kind of psychopathology, but not always. So, how do you interpret neuroscience evidence in law? So she basically came up with case studies where neuroscience evidence was used, and she wrote some guidelines that basically synthesize research in this field and talk about what's important when you're thinking about neuroscience evidence in law. And she analyzed these case studies to be like, here's where the evidence was used wrongly, but here's how you should use it differently. Here's the limitations to this evidence, and here's how we should critically think about this evidence. And she eventually wants to build like a guideline that jurors and legal staff can use to quickly understand the basics of neuroscience and neuropsychology so that it can be applicable to law. So yeah, like this is the wide range of things I get to see. It doesn't even cover like 10% of the creative ideas my students have, but it's very cool for me to be able to see these ideas. And my role is basically they have these ideas, but my role is to help them connect with the literature, interpret the literature critically, and think about, okay, you have this idea, but how do you execute this so you have a finished product that you can show at the end of the year? And how do you
Yeah.
communicate about this? So my role is mainly like guiding their interest in making it formal, but they generate these ideas, which I think is so cool.
Very interesting. And you're facilitating this whole process in your guidance. Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. That sounds amazing. I hope tomorrow everything goes well and the projects are,
Yeah.
yeah, I can't wait to hear more about this. Yeah. For someone who is struggling, because you primarily deal with undergraduate students.
Yeah.
And from what we've heard, or what I've always heard, you do a bachelor's, and then you do a master's, and then you do a PhD, and this is the only path in psychology that you take to, have a good career. So for someone who is at the stage of a bachelor's in psychology, what other career pathways can they go towards? If they're not interested in academia, then how can they go to industry, and what career pathways are available to them? And if they want to do research as well, that's also. But if there are more options, then if you could share
Yeah.
something about that, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of my students are still thinking about this, but I'm just thinking about my department historically and what students end up doing. I think some of them are interested in practice, so they may not be interested in research, but they may be interested in practice. So then they end up doing something like a master's in marriage and family counseling, and then they'll develop an expertise in that and end up being practitioners. Some of them are maybe interested in school psychology, so they will do a master's degree to be able to practice in a school. So, there's research, there's practice, and I think these are relatively well known as compared to the rest that many other students actually end up doing. Some of them pivot into education, so they actually want to teach young children because there are courses at Stanford where when you're learning developmental psychology, they're actually going to a preschool and shadowing a teacher and learning real time what developmental learning looks like. So that experience really influences them and shapes their interests. So they end up wanting to be teachers to really young children, which I think is such an interesting career to have, like out of undergrad, and think of even training for it. So there's that. Some of them are interested in law, so they end up going to law school. My feeling is that most people end up doing some additional training even after
Yeah.
an undergrad to figure out what they want and diverge into different careers. But I think the way that I think of psychology, and at least what I try to tell my students, is even if you feel like you're pivoting away from psychology, I feel like a training in psychology is really useful because human behavior is applicable in so many different fields in so many different ways. And it feels like if you aren't able to commit to anything specific, it's nice to do a degree in psychology because from there you can still go and do other things. I don't know if a degree in psychology is preparing students for any one thing perfectly, maybe research a little bit, maybe practice. It tells you that these are the pathways, but I feel like nothing's really closed off even after that. Like there's a potential to apply what you learn in psychology to a lot of different fields. So I think just an open-mindedness, trying to do internships, and feeling like even if it's a pivot away from what you think were your core interests, like it's okay, it'll teach you something new. And yeah, there are always ways to integrate multiple interests of yours. So I think that's how I think about it. It's really hard for me to think about what to do after an undergrad or what to do after this training because even I didn't know. I still don't know if I know for sure what I
Yeah.
want to do in my life, but I just feel like each experience is data for yourself to think about whether you like it or not. If you like it, keep doing it. If not, try to pivot. And I just think it's ultimately that. Like, no one ends up loving the first thing they pick, even after an undergrad. Like, many of my students will have a job. Like, say, some of them go into consulting right after and then eventually find their way into something else. So, yeah, they do a lot of different things after a degree in
Yeah.
psychology.
So exploration is key, and exposure to different sort of things. Yeah,
Exactly.
amazing. What are some of the skills that are transferable from a psychology degree to across industries, according to you?
Yeah, I think a degree in psychology, at least like say at Stanford, teaches you how to read papers critically and evaluate research critically. And I think that sort of critical thinking is applicable to so many fields. Like the idea of experimentation, like like many psych people end up doing UI UX research where the basics of experimental design even apply there, but you're thinking about like user experience and like tech related problems maybe. So there's a way, and there are many, you know, uh, nonprofits that work on research, evaluations of interventions, and things like that. So basically, a skill set where you can understand research, understand experimental design, I think is key to so many careers. So that I think a psychology degree prepares you for. The other thing is general quantitative abilities, right? Like if you're doing a degree in psychology, you have to learn basic statistics and research methodology. Like that, I think, again, applies to so many careers. Like a basic quantitative skill is so important. And the other thing that I think, at least my students seem to be really good at, and I feel like they've learned through their psychology degree, is the ability to think about the connection between psychology and different fields. That also opens up a lot of different things that you could do. And this general ability to understand human behavior, what motivates human behavior, how do we learn, these kinds of general insights, I think, about human behavior are also applicable to a wide variety of careers. So even if you're the only psychologist on a team with, say, multiple other people, there'll be a unique perspective about human behavior and thinking and learning that you can bring that I think would be impactful. So yeah, I think the general understanding, deep understanding of human behavior and what motivates us and how we connect with each other, how we communicate with each other, deep understanding of that, basic understanding of research methodology, and the ability to critically think of papers, and a quantitative skill set, I think, are the most maybe employable skill sets that a psychologist can have.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. This is really valuable for anyone who's studying or thinking of studying psychology because it can be applied to many different fields, even marketing, graphic
Exactly.
design, entrepreneurship, just about anything, policy, education. Yeah,
Mhm.
amazing. Just some advice for a young student who is thinking of doing a graduate studies like you did, maybe dreaming of going to Harvard someday or applying to other universities in the US. What would you tell them? What advice would you give them? How should they go about the application process? And what is it that worked for you that might also work for them?
Yeah, I think the main thing is research experience. And research experience doesn't have to be in the same exact field. So, for example, my experience mainly was in social cognitive development, but I switched to more like numerical cognition and things like that. So, it didn't matter that the experience that I had was the exact same thing that I ended up studying, but research experience where you are seeing a project through from start to finish. Like you deeply understand the project. You're not, I mean, I'm not saying that being a research assistant is easy, but you need to be one level above being a research assistant to a project where you have some ownership over the project in the sense that you were involved in the design process. You know, you analyze the data independently, something like that. Like, an experience with research where you can demonstrate independence, that you can think of research and you can start your own research program and answer questions. And you have a certain set of questions that you even want to answer. I think that is the most important. And research fit with the advisor that you're going to work with. So you may have all of the ideas, but if it's not the direction a lab or a PI is going in, then that wouldn't work. So I think the most important thing is getting research experience and in-depth research experience where you feel like you fully understand the project and you've seen it through multiple phases. Letters of recommendations that are strong, where people are able to speak to your abilities as an independent researcher, not just as a good student, because that isn't enough for a PhD. And research fit with the department and the professor that you're applying to work with, I think, are the three key things. The top thing being research experience, because if you have that, you'll have a good letter of recommendation, and eventually you will know how to pitch your research in a way in which it connects with others' questions.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, research experience is important to be able to, yeah.
very important.
Um, um, how much importance is given to each of the aspect? Like, what is the most, like you said, research experience is the most, but in terms of like the application committee, if you have any insight, is SOP most important or your
Yeah.
research proposal? I'm not sure if US does have a research proposal requirement because other countries do. So, any insight on that?
Yeah, I feel like the statement of purpose, a personal statement, whatever they call that, that and letters of recommendations are probably the most important, because that will at least get you an interview. And then from there on, what's important is the ability to think about research deeply, to be the kind of person that can generate ideas and feel like a colleague to the PI, right? Like where you should be able to generate new ideas together, think about how to test them. It should be like a really fun and deep way of engaging with research. Like I feel like if you have an interview where the PI is having fun talking about these ideas with you, like you have a great chance of then like getting in. So just knowing research about the big questions in the field, the contemporary methods, being excited about some questions that the PI is also excited about, then I think from the interview stage gets you to actually getting an offer. But
Yeah.
to get an interview, I would say SOP and maybe letters of recommendations. They have to be really strong letters of recommendations from people that know you personally as a researcher.
Yeah, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you so much for sharing that. That would be
Mhm.
very valuable for people applying maybe this year or next year to
Mhm.
graduate schools. What areas are exciting to you at the moment the most? Like I know you've done health psychology, developmental cognition. There's so much you've explored and discovered. But what is exciting to you right now?
Yeah. So I think I'm still biased. Like developmental cognitive science still excites me. Like I try to go to the talks in my department in this area. And I think another area that I'm really excited about, and this is mainly by following student interest, is the intersection of psychology and law. So many of my students are interested in this, and through them, I've developed an understanding of the field, and I've read some literature. And again, like the aspect that we were discussing of research and practice, like the gap exists even there. And it has just opened my eyes to how much psychology is relevant to law, because though it's all about judgment, decision making, and things like that, and there's so many biases that go into that process, and a deep understanding of human thinking, and the biases and judgment and decision making is so important to law. And though I appreciated that from a general perspective, like by reading the literature, like I've really gotten to see what some questions are over there that are unanswered, and that's just exciting to me. I'm not formally pursuing research in any topic in that, like I'm not really doing research studies, but basically I follow my students' interests and I get to read about it. And that's been so fun for me because it's widening like what I thought was the promise of psychology. Every year, as my students come up with their projects, like it's giving me an idea of really how applicable psychology is. So that's been so fun to discover, like in my career where like I'm supposed to be the teacher, but I'm learning so much through my students.
Yeah, yeah. Sometimes you do. You're a teacher, but your students do guide you and help
Exactly.
you open up your mind to different possibilities. What has been the guiding factor for you through your different roles as a student, a researcher, a lecturer, and a program designer? What has kept you going as a psychologist? What's motivating you always?
Yeah.
Yeah.
One is being interested in the big questions of the field. Like I still think about some of the questions, like, does language affect thought? What's unique about human cognition? I just love thinking about those things. And the thing that I think keeps me going, like every day that makes me want to go to work and like feel excited about it, is when I got into this field, there were a few people that were excited about the opportunity to introduce the field to a person who knows nothing about it. Like I was a very naive, wide-eyed student, and one PhD student at Boston University was like, okay, that is an interest, like interest in the field is good enough for me. You don't need to have any prerequisites, and I will teach you everything. And that was exciting to her, and that changed my life, right? Like working with PhD students who truly cared about mentoring, cared about me learning about a field rather than just treating me as a research assistant. Like they taught me as some they taught me things, and they made me like learn new things about a field and things like that. So what is exciting to me, what kept me excited even during my PhD and now in my career, is the ability to share that excitement with younger folks who are now getting into psychology. Like if I can make them feel like they could they are equal partners in the process of science. They're not just research assistants. They have ownership over these projects. They can think about science. They can do something with this. Even if they realize they don't want to be in academia, like what can they learn out of this experience that's generalizable that they can take with them? So the opportunity to just introduce the field to students and seeing them be mind blown by things that I was mind blown by like a few years ago, like it's just such an exciting experience. And even through my PhD, I did a lot of teaching and mentoring, and I get to do that in my current roles. I think, yeah, just sharing insights from the field with students that are getting into it is, I think, the most exciting part for me.
Yeah, and I think that's what you did today for our listeners. If the students who are listening, they would be so excited to explore the field and apply it in different ways. So I just want to thank you for sharing your knowledge and your understanding with us and for inspiring so many people to pick psychology, go into research, apply it in different ways, and to solve real world problems, just like you are doing. So thank you so much, and you're just so inspirational for all of us who know you, and we're just like always rooting for you because you're from our department, you're from our faculty, and yeah. So thank you for being here today and joining us and sharing your knowledge with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Yeah, like I said, it's always fun to connect with people from UOH. So yeah, thanks for inviting me. And yeah, if I can ever be of help, just feel free to reach out.
Thank you so much, and yeah, we'll stay connected, and I hope to have more conversations with you
Yeah,
about.
yeah,
Yeah, thank you. Have a wonderful day.
you too. Bye.
Bye. Good luck tomorrow.
Yeah, thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.